It was just another evening at the local dojo. The air was thick with the smell of sweat, polish, and pride. The mats echoed with the sound of feet striking leather pads, and laughter filled the room as a group of young black belts showed off their moves. They were strong, skilled, and a little too sure of themselves. Among them were Jake, Leo, and Mason, three friends who had trained together for years. To them, this gym was more than a place to train. It was a stage, a place where they felt invincible. But that night, someone else was watching. At the far corner of the gym, sitting quietly on an old wooden bench, was an elderly man. He wore plain slacks, a simple shirt, and a weathered jacket. His gray hair was neatly combed, his hands resting on a cane that looked more like an old habit than a necessity. No one paid much attention to him at first. Maybe they thought he was someone's grandfather or just a passerby waiting for a ride. But there was something about him. Something quiet. Steady. His eyes, calm and focused, watched every move on the mat. Jake was the first to notice. He chuckled and nudged his friends. "Hey, look at that old guy. Think he's lost?" Leo grinned. "Maybe he came to sign up for seniors yoga." Their laughter drew glances from the other students. Even the instructor smiled faintly, thinking it was harmless fun. Mason tilted his head. "Let's ask him. Maybe he wants a free lesson." So they walked over. Jake, full of confidence, stopped in front of the man and said loudly, "Sir, you waiting for someone? Or just scouting for inspiration?" The old man looked up. His eyes were soft, kind, but deep, as if they'd seen far more than this gym could ever show. "Just watching," he said simply. His voice carried a calm strength, the kind that made you want to listen even though he said almost nothing. Leo crossed his arms. "Watching, huh? Well, this is a dojo, not a retirement home." More laughter. Even Jake couldn't hide a grin. But the old man didn't react. He just nodded, his gaze steady. "Good," he said quietly. "Always good to see young men training." That tone, respectful but certain, somehow made Leo pause. Still, Mason smirked. "You ever train, old-timer? Want to show us a move?" That got the crowd's attention. A few students chuckled. Even the instructor looked up from his clipboard. The old man looked at the mat, then back at Mason. His reply was simple, almost too calm. "Are you sure?" The words hung in the air like a quiet warning, but the young men only laughed harder. Jake waved him over. "Come on, Grandpa. We'll go easy on you." Then, without a word, the old man placed his cane beside the bench and stood. It was strange. The moment he rose, the room seemed to fall quieter. His movements were slow but controlled, his back straightening as though the years had just fallen off his shoulders. He removed his jacket and folded it neatly. Beneath the rolled-up sleeve of his shirt, a faded tattoo showed, the kind of mark you didn't get for decoration. The laughter faded. No one knew why, but something about the way he stood, perfectly balanced, utterly calm, made everyone stop. The instructor frowned, watching closely now. The old man stepped onto the mat and bowed slightly. His eyes met Jake's, not in challenge, but in quiet understanding, and in that silent moment, every person in that room felt it. This wasn't going to be a joke anymore. For a moment, no one moved. The old man stood at the center of the mat, his hands relaxed at his sides, his eyes calm, not defiant, not proud, just still. Jake cracked a grin, trying to shake off the uneasy silence. "All right, old man," he said, bouncing lightly on his heels. "Show us what you've got." A few students chuckled nervously. The instructor opened his mouth to say something, maybe to stop it, but curiosity won. Everyone wanted to see what would happen. Jake raised his fists and took a playful jab forward. It wasn't even serious, just enough to make the crowd laugh again, but they didn't. Because the moment Jake moved, the old man shifted, one smooth, effortless step. It was like watching time slow down. In a blink, Jake was on the ground, flat on his back, air knocked out of his lungs. No one even saw how it happened. The old man didn't gloat. He didn't even speak. He just stepped back, allowing Jake to stand. The room went silent except for Jake's ragged breathing. Leo's grin faded. "Lucky move," he muttered. Then he stepped forward. He threw a fast roundhouse kick, full force this time. But the old man moved like water. A subtle twist of the hips, a quiet pivot, and Leo's own momentum carried him off balance. The old man's hand brushed his shoulder, redirecting him, and suddenly Leo was face down on the mat beside Jake. The laughter was gone now. Even Mason, who had been smirking moments ago, just stood frozen. His hand tightened into a fist. He wasn't laughing anymore. He was embarrassed, angry. "All right," Mason said, his voice hard. "Enough games." He rushed forward with a flurry of punches, but the old man didn't even flinch. His steps were light, precise. Every movement had purpose. He slipped past the strikes, his body flowing effortlessly between openings. And then, in a blink, Mason's arm was locked, twisted just enough to make him drop to his knees in pain. The crowd gasped. The old man let go instantly and helped him up, gentle, almost fatherly. Then he spoke, his voice soft but firm. "Power fades," he said. "But skill stays if you respect it." No one dared move. The instructor stepped closer, eyes wide. He'd seen martial artists from around the world, but nothing like this, sir. The instructor began carefully. "Where did you learn to move like that?" The old man gave a faint smile. "A long time ago. In places I hope you'll never have to see." Jake, still breathing hard, looked up at him. "You were military, weren't you?" The old man's eyes softened, just for a moment. Something like that. Then Leo noticed the faded tattoo on the man's forearm. It wasn't decorative. It was a mark of service. A unit insignia. The instructor's eyes widened as recognition hit. "My God," he whispered. "You're Thomas Hale?" "Sergeant Major Hale, 5th Special Forces Group." A murmur spread across the room. The younger students exchanged stunned glances. Even Jake's jaw dropped. The old man, Thomas, nodded quietly. "That was a lifetime ago," he said. "Now I just like to watch young people chase discipline." For a long moment, no one spoke. The sound of the gym clock ticking filled the silence. Then Thomas bowed slightly to the instructor, picked up his jacket, and began to leave the mat. Behind him, 3 black belts stood speechless, their pride replaced by something new. That night, no one in that dojo talked about winning or losing again. They talked about control, about patience, about humility, because sometimes it takes just one quiet old man to remind a room full of fighters what true strength really means. The gym was quieter than usual that night. No laughter, no boasting. Just the faint hum of the ceiling fan and the occasional squeak of a shoe on the mat. The 3 black belts, Jake, Leo, and Mason, stood near the corner, still processing what had just happened. Their faces, usually full of confidence, were now thoughtful, almost ashamed. Thomas Hale, the man they had mocked minutes ago, was sitting on the same bench where it all began. His jacket folded neatly beside him, his breathing steady. He looked calm, as if the whole incident had meant nothing. But to everyone else in that gym, it meant everything. Jake was the first to move. He approached slowly, his voice lower than before. "Sir," he began, I'm sorry. "We didn't mean to disrespect you." Thomas looked up, his eyes kind again. "No harm done," he said gently. "You were testing what you thought you understood. That's what young men do." Leo came closer, his tone full of regret. "We thought we knew what strength meant." Thomas smiled faintly. "Strength is easy when you have youth and muscle. But real strength." He paused, tapping a hand against his chest. "Lives here." Mason sat down beside him on the bench, still rubbing his wrist from the hold. "Sir, were you really in the Special Forces?" Thomas nodded. "A long time ago. Back when strength meant protecting someone else, not proving something to yourself." The instructor joined them, bowing slightly out of respect. "I've trained fighters for 20 years, he said quietly, "but I've never seen movement like yours. It wasn't flashy, it was precise." Thomas chuckled softly. "When you've been in real fights, you stop thinking about impressing anyone. You just learn to move with purpose, and to finish things quickly." He paused, looking around at the room. "The punching bags, the mats, the trophies. You have good students here. he said to the instructor. Strong hearts. But remember, a dojo is not just for teaching how to fight. It's for teaching when not to. His words hung in the air like a lesson carved into stone. The young men listened quietly. For once, no one interrupted. Thomas reached for his cane, stood slowly, and put on his jacket. Before leaving, he turned back toward the group. Don't stop learning, he said. When you think you've mastered everything, that's when you start to lose. He gave a small nod, then walked toward the door. His steps were steady, almost silent, the kind of walk that belonged to someone who had faced storms far worse than ridicule. As the door closed behind him, the dojo remained silent. No one dared break it. Jake looked at his friends, then down at the mat where he'd fallen earlier. He didn't even try to hurt us, he murmured. He just showed us. Leo nodded. He could have embarrassed us, but he didn't. He taught us. The instructor smiled faintly. That's what a warrior does. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, the instructor stayed behind. Something about that encounter wouldn't leave his mind. He opened his laptop, typed,